Hello, welcome back, Boxcutter1 here, and today I'm going to teach you my three methods to do backgrounds for art. Now, these are three different ones I've learned over my, I guess, probably like 5 years of doing and practicing art. So, they're not perfect, and you may not find some of them as helpful as others, but these are some of the techniques that I've learned. So the technique I think is most useful, I'd say, and the best for producing a great image that you thought of in your mind, or using references, which is a great way to do it. Using references is a great way to form backgrounds, which I don't use references because, well, actually I use them very, very rarely. I mainly use my own, own imagination. But this is one way to do it, using or beginning with the end in mind. So this means either using references or just thinking, basically, before you start. Now, thinking before you start can improve how it turns out because you already know what you're doing. There's no real thinking. Like this one, I already thought of somebody laying down on a bed, and so I made this scene around that. So they're kind of slightly off-centered, but they're the main point of focus, and then around them is the background, and it actually forms to make sense with the little lines to show the pressure on the bed from the person laying down. And I think it works good for, well, everything really, because it gives you a clear picture from the start of how it's going to turn out, probably the best way to do it. And if you're ever wondering how to think of what to do for a background, as I said before, you can use references, you can just look in the real world, like walk outside for a little while and just think of looking at some trees or something, look at a landscape, and maybe that'll inspire you. Or you can just watch, I don't know, shows or something that you like, and that could also help inspire you. But that's one way to do it. Now let's go on to the next one. Now this is another way I've learned to do backgrounds, and this is one I actually do more, which it's probably not the best method, but it works. Now this is improvising as you go along. Now, many artists will probably say that this is not a good idea because it can turn out a bit weird, but for me, I like weird, so I do it this way. And for this, you make your subject first, or what you want to be the focus of the image, and then you make the background around them. So for this one, this person's laying in the grass, and I decided that because I don't know, I improvise. The hair looks like it's just on a flat surface on the back, so I just decided to make her laying down in the grass. And I think it turned out I made it differently than I usually do, with some cross-hatching of the colors, and I think it turned out pretty well. But doing this method, it gives more focus on the, I'd say, on the main foreground, because you do that first, you get good with that, you like how that turns out, and then you focus on the background, instead of focusing in all at once, which can cause it to, well, it can cause it to not turn out all how you want it, because you're switching between background and foreground. But it can also lead to one being more detailed, such as this character, than the background, or vice versa, where the character is less detailed and the background's more detailed. Either way, it's a method I use the most, and I'll show you some examples of that soon. So the third and final method is doing partial backgrounds or allusions to backgrounds. Now, this one is a little different. I just had the idea to do this, and I didn't want to make it a full piece because, well, I was lazy, but I decided to give it somewhat of a background, to give it somewhat of a, make it look like it's part of something. So I added some grass on the ground with some shadow, and it doesn't take up the whole page, but I think it turned out pretty good, and I actually like this for its simplicity with the background. Another allusion to a background is having or coloring it in slightly. Now I hatched it in basically for the majority of that, and I gave Mr. George Custer here, or Lieutenant Colonel George Custer here, just a slightly darker background at the edges and then slightly lighter to make it look like an old photograph type thing, which is the look I was going for. So I think it turned out pretty good, and it's a way to get around backgrounds, basically. It's being lazy, but it's one way you can do it if you like the foreground piece so much you don't want to either detract from the look or make people focus on something else, so you just mainly do the foreground and you put less detail in the background. Now, this is another method, or this is another example of method 2, which I decided to have these characters, which were from a dream, so they're a bit weird. This lady who was a businesswoman, this guy with mechanical hands, and this girl who had mechanical hands but no longer has mechanical hands because she messed with the wrong person. So she lost her mechanical hands. But for this one, I decided I wanted her sitting down on a box. And I wanted the background to be somewhat like a bookstore or like a cafe. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that's what it's supposed to be. And you can see I did something with the lighting there. That may be in a different video where I discuss lighting, but I'm still working on that, so not yet. But this, I drew the characters in the foreground, and I made the box just a small outline of a box, so I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do. And so I was able to form the drawing around them. Now this is a bit of a darker piece, so it's not as much color besides in the lights and the lighting on them because of the light, but I think it turned out pretty good, and I basically improvised along the way. I got some pen by accident up here, which I decided to make it into a feature because, I mean, you can't erase pen, really, unless you have a special eraser, but I don't even know if those exist. They do, probably. But I think it turned out pretty well with my improvising strategy, and let me show you some other examples of that. Now, another example of this is from my animation test, the first one I did, and it comes with this background here, which I knew what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be like a town, or kind of like a futuristic town thing. So I drew the character first that I wanted to be the focus of the frame, which it's actually up as test animation 1 on my channel, so you can look at that if you want to see the whole thing, but it's a basic, not even a full storyboard, but a part of a storyboard, but I think it looks pretty good. But yeah, I improvised the background for the entire thing, and I think it turned out pretty good. This is one of my favorite frames of all the stuff in these first couple scenes, but I think it turned out pretty good with my improvising strategy, and it gave it a nice look, I think. Now for the first one, I should have done this where I show these off as I go, but we're doing it this way now, I guess. Where this is what we did. This is where we begin with the end in mind. That's my first strategy. This is one I did a while ago, also based off a dream, where I wanted them to be laying on or leaning, or just standing on a pier that was in the dream. So I did that, and I think it turned out pretty good, because I had the pier already pictured in my mind, so I just had to draw the characters around that, or with that in mind, which I did. And I think that looked very good because of that. Another one I did, actually a year ago, which is surprising, or nearly a year ago now. It is a landscape drawing, which I usually don't do much of, but I should work on those. But what I knew I wanted to do is I wanted to have this laboratory here, which it looks pretty good. I enjoyed doing that. But I wanted to have this futuristic laboratory in the foreground, or not really the foreground, but as part of the main focus of the image. And then I wanted to have a background of either trees, or I wanted to have a background of plains, ocean, or not ocean, like a plains of snow, just completely white. But I thought it didn't have enough contrast with just snow, so I wanted to add trees in the background. and I think that made it look pretty good. I also have a small little building up there, and I made the sky gray, which, I mean, that was it's kind of a combination with this one, because I knew I wanted to have this in the background, this in the foreground, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with the sky, so I improvised. It's a combination of 1 and 2 methods. Very cool. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope these strategies and these examples help you, or at least inspire you, to start doing your backgrounds, because you can't run from them forever. So, I'm getting head start on working on backgrounds as soon as possible, so I'm doing backgrounds now. So I hope you'll think they look better with the backgrounds. And I enjoy doing art, so I'll probably do some more art stuff in November, such as animation stuff, mainly talking about animation and how to do it, actually. So if you want to wait and see that, consider subscribing, and I shall see you next time.